start out and let's start and talk a little bit about identity, because every entity wants to have an identity. You saw a montage of different identifiers of this whole region that we started out with. One of the, I think, identifiers that we have here in Blue Valley starts at the top, and it starts with our elected officials. We have an elected Board of Education that, quite frankly, do an outstanding job. They provide vision for us, they provide direction, they provide oversight and accountability. They're non-paid, and they just do a tremendous job of pushing us to be the best that we can absolutely be. So I want to recognize those folks at this time. Hold your applause until I've introduced all of them. But Pam Robinson, our Board of Education President, would you please stand? Mike Seitz, our Board of Education Vice President. Cindy Bowling. Sue Matson. Tom Mitchell. Stacy Obringer-Varhall. And Tony Till. Let's give them a round of applause. You know, another identifier for us is something that we take very, very seriously, and it happens at the building level, and it's something we call student engagement. We really want to be known and identified in Blue Valley as a district that engages kids, that helps kids find their passion, that helps them come up with that thing or that person that really is going to propel them onto a future that might even be above and beyond the future that they can envision now. So you might be asking, well, how do you measure student engagement? Well, you're probably familiar with the Gallup Corporation. This time of year, a lot of polling takes place with elections coming up. And Gallup does a lot of that. Well, Gallup also surveys nationally students, they survey parents, they survey teachers. And a few years ago, we started using them and we started engaging them in a student engagement survey because we wanted to know how engaged were our kids. Well, you'll see on the screen 10 different items that are a part of this survey. Now, the survey is much longer, but kids are asked to indicate whether they strongly disagree, they're ambivalent, they agree, or they strongly agree on these topics. I was at a presentation where the CEO of Gallup, Brandon Bustede, was presenting. He had a really interesting piece of information that he shared. He said there are two of these particular statements that if students mark strongly agree, they are 30 times more likely to be engaged in their school than if they mark them disagree. So, little quiz. I want you to just look at those in your own mind, pick out which two you think are the 30x or are the 30-time identifiers if students mark those in the strongly category. Okay, let's show which two it is. The bottom two. My school is committed to building the strengths of each student, and I have at least one teacher who makes me excited about the future. So let's talk about each of those for just a quick minute. My school is committed to building the strength of each student. The thing that stands out to me when I look at this one is that this means that a student is not being egocentric. To be able to mark this strongly agree, they have to be looking at their surroundings and they have to see what's happening all across the school. In other words, there has to be a culture. There has to be a culture built that they recognize that absolutely every student in that school is having someone help them build upon their strengths, because that's what we want to do with kids. We want to find what they're good at, and we want to help them to be even better. Do we want to help them be better in the things they're not quite so good at? Sure. But really what we're after is propelling them to the future, to the things that they're strong in. You know, whether that be math and science, whether that be communication arts, whether that be the arts, whatever that is. So that one's not egocentric at all. But then the second one, I think, is equally as important, and that's very egocentric, and that is, for me, I've got at least one teacher who makes me excited about the future. We want to start with that in kindergarten. We want every one of our 22,000 kids to have a caring adult, more than likely a teacher in the building, that absolutely helps them to become excited about the future. And we think if we can do that, we're going to have an unbelievably engaged student body. So, just thought you might be interested in that a little bit. I want to talk also about the fact that after I heard Brandon give this presentation, I went up to talk to him, and I try to make a habit of that. When I find somebody that's way smarter than I am or has a whole lot of information that I don't know, I go try to see what I can glean from them. So we had a really engaging conversation, no pun intended, an engaging conversation afterwards. And we started talking about what it takes to create that culture. And we both came to the conclusion and would agree that probably the most important thing that a superintendent does when it comes to hiring is hiring building principals. Now think about that for a minute, because most people might jump to the conclusion that I'd be talking about teachers. Well, let's talk about teachers for a second. They're the key. Teachers are absolutely the key to this whole thing. There's no doubt about it. But who hires the teachers? Well, it's the building principal. So you better have doggone good building principals and building administrators to hire those folks that are going to help with the student engagement piece, that are going to be those people that help ensure that there's an exciting future for those kids. And it dawned on me that in the 11 years I've been doing this, I've never really taken the time to recognize those principles. So we're going to roll something here. You know what? I skipped that. We'll come back to it. One of those things. We're going to roll something here dealing with the principals, because I want you to see them. I want you to see how they interact with kids. I want you to see how they interact with the adults. I want you to see the leadership skills that they have to have in order to create this engaging community. Because I am so excited that we have been able to hire principals that, quite frankly, are off the chart. I have 5 high school principals, folks, that like one another. Now think about that. They like one another. They have formed their own professional learning community. They get together on their own to share best practices. I've got 20 elementary principals. That's too big of a group for them to get together, so they on their own have divided themselves up into support groups where they can call and get together and talk about best practices. I've got middle school principals who love to help each other problem solve. So for the first time, and please forgive me, principals, for being 11 years too late, but I want you to stand and be recognized by everyone in this audience. Thank you. Now, back to the slide that I missed. I doubt that they can go back to it. But in talking about that engagement survey, we had 5 of our middle schools who scored in the top 25%, the top quartile of all the schools in the country in terms of their student engagement levels. So I want to recognize them: Pleasant Ridge, Prairie Star, Overland Trail, Aubrey Bend, and Lakewood Middle.